obviously we've done them differently over the years. So how do you
Yeah, I mean, sorry for the delay. This kind of when the season wraps up, it may be hard to understand from the outside, but it's like the toughest and busiest time of the year. I think the most important thing for me to do is meet with our players individually and set a good course for where they're headed. You know, for a lot of them, it's professional, or a number of them, it's professional baseball. A lot of the guys that will return, you know, getting back to summer baseball. Some of the pitchers getting into their off-season training, and I don't ever like to short-circuit that part of it, you know, because it becomes the first phase of the new year. So that took a good couple days, and then, you know, changing landscape of college baseball. You know, we're just right into the recruiting phase really heavily, and literally every minute of every hour of every day has been booked since we lost to Southern Miss. And so as far as, you know, the season, I'm very proud of our team. I don't, you know, other than playing today or tomorrow, I guess we would have played tomorrow. You know, I'm very, very proud of what the team accomplished. You know, I think making a significant jump in the SEC standings was a good accomplishment. I think winning 40 games was a very good accomplishment. I think obviously, as you can see how the NCAA tournament has played out, we've played one of the most difficult schedules in the country, you know, and certainly weren't perfect, but managed it well. I think we played through the deficiencies in our team, you know, probably about as good as we could. And so there's some peace of mind, you know, relative to the effort the players gave. I think probably my proudest moment of the season, and this may sound a little bit strange, was immediately after the last game and seeing how much the success of this team and the success of the program meant to them, and the disappointment in not getting to play together anymore. You know, that made me proud to feel like we're on the right track as far as foundation. And you know, I mean, as a competitor, and you know, you probably got the sense when the game's over, like, you know, until we hold the trophy or put the seventh one up, you know, there's not going to be a completeness, you know, to how I feel about it. But sometimes that's not ultimately in your control. You know, we try to control as many elements of those. I try to control as many of those elements as I can. But I think it was a good start, and really energized and excited about what we're doing to move forward.
Coach, year one in the books now. What might have been the biggest surprise for you on or off the field, you know, in year one that maybe 9 months ago you wouldn't have saw coming?
You know, it's a good question. I think that not a lot. I feel very prepared to coach here. I do. And, you know, I try to do a lot of research, not just before I accepted the job, but once I got here, for the things that were coming along. You know, I owe Coach Burtman and Coach Maneri a lot. I mean, those guys have embraced me like you couldn't even believe. I mean, I talk to Coach Burtman 4 times a week, you know, and Coach Maneri, when I call him, he picks up the phone, and they were very helpful, you know, in that regard. And so, you know, I'm very proud to be the coach here because of all the great alums and coaches that have come here, and they really helped with that. I think the other thing, and you'll see this the longer we go here, is, you know, we have a method, you know, in running a program that we'll stay true to. And then at the same time, there's a lot changing in college athletics right now. And, you know, a lot of people ask me, hey, what do you think of this or that? I don't really think about what I think about it. You have to be on your toes and adapt and go. I think, you know, we're trying to use the advantage of, there's no advantage of not being in the College World Series, but we've used the days between when we finished the season and today as productive as you possibly could, and we'll continue to do that. And I believe in that. I believe in the year is kind of like 9 innings, and you know, this is the top of the first inning, and I think, you know, for 2023 we've scored a few runs in the top of the first inning. So excited about that, and you know, we're being productive.
What does the number of teams in Omaha say about the SEC West meat grinder?
I'm not surprised. I'm proud to finish 3rd in that division, and you know, there's things for this year that those teams are they were tough on us. Really physical lineups where if maybe you don't have high end or first round pitching, that they could score runs, and they did in the games against us. If you had a defensive vulnerability and gave them extra outs, that they were able to take advantage of that. And when you look at it, I mean, let's just take Ole Miss, because they finished 5th in the standings. I mean, they shut out the team they played in the Super Regional twice, and maybe that was what was thought to be the vulnerability of their team. So all high-end teams. I think we were a high-end team. I think there was just a little more completeness, to them. And, to finish ahead of Auburn and Ole Miss in the standings, again, good accomplishment. Would I have rather finished 5th and be playing in Omaha? Sure, But I think there's way more positive than negative in regards to results. The NCAA tournament's tough. I mean, number one, the best team in the country the last 2 years has not made it to Omaha. And, so it just, baseball's a little different in that regard. So all of these things that you do to make your program and your teams complete are really important. And that's kind of where my focus is now.
Coach, I guess kind of looking at the transfer portal, with the draft being so late as it is this year, just how do you balance, how many guys you want to take in from the portal, and obviously with the draft that's coming up, is that something you're still kind of learning about because the draft is a little bit later this year?
I think the draft being late, I mean, I'll give you my opinion, is horrendous for us as coaches in college baseball. But, I mean, Major League Baseball, it's a business, and it's to drive money, and they feel like having the draft around the All-Star game, that's what they're going to do. So we have to adapt. We have a lot of balls in the air right now. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, you turn on the combine on MLB Network, and there's an LSU recruit, running the 60 or talking on the set or all of that, is what it is, we'll see what happens with those guys. We've made strong pitches for why we think this is the right way, and you won't ever change my belief that it's better for a player to come do this. I think the thing that changes it sometimes for players is money, and some of those guys are going to get a lot of money, and they're not going to be here. I think there's 4 that have no chance of showing up here next year based on the seasons they have and where they are, and it is what it is. I'm going to move forward to get us what we need. I'm not going to let one player, current or hold our program hostage. I'm just not doing it. I wasn't hired for that, and we're going to be okay. It's a complicated issue that I spend every day working on, and got to do what you got to do, and they got to do what they got to do. So we'll be okay. And I think we now have a different avenue of where we can overcome some of those losses. Kind of gives you a thought, maybe you want to build your team 1 year at a time, which not really the way I believed in it. I look back at, how we finished, the tenure at Arizona, and was really proud that those guys were through it all the way through it. And I think that's where sometimes maybe your coaching ability can really impact it. It's right now it's just talent grab, and then we'll adjust to that. And that's part of what you have to do to be at the top. And so again, we'll do that.
What are some players?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Is there one moment from this season that will kind of always stand out to you?
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think sweeping national champion on the road, coming from behind with 2 strikes and 2 outs and nobody on base, and winning on Friday night stands out. Sweeping the team that was in the finals of the College World Series on the road, and really a dominating performance. I think we're done with the season. We're not in Omaha, but I think those 2 weekends were really key for what we want to do moving forward. And then, we didn't win the regional, we didn't finish off the tournament, and trust me, that's what I want to do. But I think those 2 comebacks, we got behind because of flaws in our team. We found a way because of some strengths in our team and the character of the players. And I think, you didn't win the regional, but those are 2 games you can point back to of feeling good about the dynamic that's being built here. And wasn't the result at the end that we wanted, but I think it'd be a great program for 20 years. You know what I mean? And I think those things, they have value.
There's some players from this year's roster even coming into the program that are kind of in between that fence of going into the draft and coming here, and that you've had some serious conversations with about coming here?
Yeah, as far as that, I mean, honesty is just where I roll. I think the draft kind of tells you what your value is to pro baseball, whether you're a potential I'm going to sign or I'm going to go to college or LSU or an LSU player. There's the prospects, there's the guys just behind the prospects, and then there's guys that are there so the prospects can play catch or play games. And each player has to decide, what's more valuable to them. And some guys just, that's their dream and they want to go chase it and go for it. But, if you're not drafted incredibly high, your runway for success in pro baseball is small. I think what's great about LSU is there's a lot. If you walk away from this, you're walking away from a lot. And I've mentioned this before. I think Coach Maneri did a really good job of keeping seniors in the program that should stay, and hopefully we'll be able to do that if the situation's right. But if there's a guy that maybe kind of came out of nowhere and now has a chance to play pro baseball, if you put yourself in that player's shoes, you kind of understand where they're coming from. I just try to give them advice based on what's going to be best for them while being the caretaker of the program at the same time. And you can do both. And the longer I do this, the better I feel like I can be at helping players with those decisions. And I don't have any answers as far as who I think's coming back or any of those kinds of things. But we've started the process and the communication of what it would look like here, and the draft will tell you what it looks like there.
Has anybody told you thanks, I'm done with baseball?
Man, a lot's happened since those meetings. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, I see that people know that some guys have decided to go in the transfer portal, and that's their decision. Really the only ones that come to mind, and I had great meetings with the entire team. There wasn't one bad meeting. I don't have a guy that could come back that has just said I'm done. I don't think that happened. I was a non-Division I player. There's a lot of places to play, and being on the field is valuable. And I think the guys that have decided to go in the portal have just decided that their opportunity to play or their window to be on the field may be better at a different place. And that was their decision, and I'm going to respect that. And if any of them asked for my help, I would help them. There's a couple conversations where, what do you think? And there was a lot actually. And I just, like I said, be straightforward to them. You can do both as far as what's in the best interest of the player and what's in the best interest of the team.
Looking back on their roster management wise, I know you talked in the past that you'd like to add more speed, but do you feel like you were right on the numbers of pitchers, players, anything?
Hard to even say right now. And trust me, there's no disorganization in that. It's just when you have a recruiting class that we do, like I said, I think there's 4 that probably going to go in the first round or in the top 32 picks, whatever it is. And then there's a group of like 5 or 6. Feel like it could go either way, and my thing is we'll be okay no matter what. I mean, it may take a little more of like, hey, you may not have this guy 3 years from now, but for next year we'll be okay, and we now have an avenue to cover your losses a little bit better, and that's kind of where my focus has been recently.
What are the important dates in the next 45 to 60 days when it comes to portal, your signing class, and who signs and goes pro?
Yeah, I think they're having the combine thing right now. It's kind of a new deal. I think they did it last year for the first time, and that was right in the midst of transitioning here. And I think they're trying to promote it even more. So that's going on right now in San Diego, which a couple of our players are there as well. And then you're looking at the draft in July, and then the sign-in deadline is pretty quickly after that. And how Major League Baseball operates now, if you see a guy go in the top 10 rounds, they're gone. Like it's usually how the business is done. We put a good effort in months ago and have communicated with all of our guys, and we'll continue to communicate with it. I think I've just kind of got to the place where man, those guys were hurt when we lost at Southern Miss, and we were a little short, as a team, and just don't want to let that happen, in key areas. Obviously, the pitcher's mound, the defense, and those types of things. So whether it's the incoming recruiting class, the transfer portal, the returning players improvement, like we're going to have it right. And
so when they come off the board, you have to be ready. Like you have
Yeah.
a game plan, and like
Yeah.
he went higher than we thought. So now we need to call.
Yeah, and we try to do the work. I mean, having good relationships in the recruiting process is good. Communication's been good with players and their advisors and all of those kinds of things. And we'll see what happens. For some people that don't know, may feel like the sky's falling when that deal comes around, but it won't. And we'll be prepared for just about anything. I think there's a couple positions you really have to pay attention to where we cannot be hurt or short here, which we have good plans for that. Wouldn't want to say any recruit is more important than the other, but when you kind of look at what the possibilities are out there, there's certain guys we need to do everything we can to make sure they get here, and if not, that they're getting $3 million or drafted in the first round. And if somebody is a first round pick of a team, they're basically making them the face of that draft. Still think this is better for the long term of the player's development, with the money and the commitment that organization makes. You don't win those fights very often.
How much, I guess, of an urgency are you putting on having a coaching staff in place, this is as far as before the draft or after the draft? Is that something you talked about, having this, that in place before, obviously a lot of these decisions have to be made?
The roster is the most important thing right now. And I love Dan and I love Jason, and they're very worthy candidates and head coaches and all of those kinds of things. And I think it worked out. I think I made really good decisions that, to bring them here, and the fact that one's a Power 5 head coach and one's being considered to be a Power 5 head coach speaks to their quality and speaks to the quality of the program we have here. But right now, for me, the players is the most important thing. So I'm addressing that. And then obviously the coaching staff relative to those players is important. And we'll have stars, we'll have guys that players want to come play for that can help them develop into national championship caliber program and future major leaguers. And so I look at it only as a positive. I know that might sound crazy. All will be well. All will be well.
You mentioned you mentioned 4 players in the class that might be taken highly in the draft, and the 5 and 6 are kind of like on the fence. Can you put names to those players? Not really. I think if you did your research, and you do a great job, that it's not hard to figure it out. I mean, there's a guy with supreme talent that it doesn't fall out of the sky. There's a guy that I think is one of the best hitters in the country for the high school class, and as soon as I saw some video of him in January swinging a bat, he wasn't really up on the radar, but it was like, this is going to be a problem. Like, this might as well look like Corey Seager. And then, you don't have to look hard. And then there's another group that, all those bonus pools went up significantly, and I don't like it. I wish it was more like football, where they got to declare if they're a high school player, and you go right down the line, and if you're picked this, you're paid this. But there's a lot of smart people with Ivy League degrees that weren't PE majors that figured out how to get as many talented people into professional baseball as possible, and those teams take advantage of it. So we educate the players. We have contingency plans. Like I said, we now have an avenue to cover ourselves that we haven't had, frankly. And, it's makes it a little uncertain, but, if you work at it and you put the right pieces in place for players, which we have a lot of those pieces at LSU, you can come out all right. You added a pitcher from the transfer portal recently. Are you allowed to speak on that?
I'm not going to talk about any of the new guys just yet. We'll have a time. What I'd like to do, and I think Coach Maneri did this in the past, at least I feel like he said to me, is once we have a pretty good idea of what the fall roster looks like, we'll go through all of that in detail.
The avenue you were talking about, that's the portal, right? As far as contingency plans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just make sure.
In Hattiesburg, you had one play with a pitcher, but overall, fielding wasn't the reason why you lost
Nope.
that regional. And Jordan Thompson down the stretch, he was
Awesome.
he was fielding all the ground balls.
Outstanding.
So, do you feel like you've got a good grasp on the defense going into next year? Or
Yeah.
you take a look at the totality of the
All of it,
area?
yeah. No, you know, I mean, I love it. It's one of the great things about being here. Is somebody, everybody cares so much, and it's like, man, you're awful on defense. Well, you know, there was a period where we were, but if you look at the last month and a half of the season, we weren't. I mean, I would actually be curious if Bill dug up, you know, what the fielding percentage was relative to everybody else in the league over the last 25 games, and I bet we're in the top half. And you know, there's a lot to that, and I could point to the reasons why it doesn't really matter now. I feel confident about what we're going to do and what we need to do going forward. I think, you know, I know it'll be in a better place. I think it got to a better place. And you mentioned Jordan, credit to him, you know, for withstanding the difficulty and the frustration. Nobody's more frustrated than him and how he played, but he completely pulled himself out of it. We swept Vanderbilt and we're in a regional final largely because of how he played. And I have a ton of confidence in him. And, you know, I alluded to it when we were in the regional of him being one of the most mentally tough guys on the team. And I think he definitely exhibited that. And you know, I look at every area of the thing. How are we going to get better? And we're doing that as we're going, and we got better. There was a couple games we lost because we didn't take care of the ball. And then the fielding percentage is low. I mean, a lot of those errors were actually made by pitchers, like down the stretch. That doesn't have and that's part of defense. But I think looking at where we're at now, or finished, was a lot better than where we were. And then we made some adjustments in terms of personnel on how we were doing things. And we'll make some adjustments in how we train and all of that. And we'll be in a good spot on that. Obviously, you can't. It's really hard. You're an outlier team in Omaha, and we're not in Omaha if you don't play really good defense. It's really hard to do that, and the numbers will back that up. And you know, those teams that are there, again, we finished higher than a couple of them, but they're a little more complete. And as we were going through the schedule, like, I knew that. And so in the meantime, you do the best you can with what you have, and then you look for ways, whether it's talent, development, structure, to improve all of it, and we'll do all those things.
Is there a certain round later on where you're thinking local NIL dollars can actually start to compete?
Man, yeah, that's the thought, and you hear a lot of crazy stuff out there right now. I think our players this year, I think LSU did a great job. You know, Scott Woodward, Stephanie Remp, our whole department was, you know, Taylor Jacobs is running that now. We were ahead, and I think, you know, there's guys on our roster that were really able to take advantage of that because of the platform they have, because we have more fans and following than anybody. So that makes LSU a great place in that regard. I think a lot of people are kind of figuring it out and how to advance it, and you know, it's just a fine line between the rules and what you're allowed to do and what's truth and what's fiction and all of that. So
With the new law, you can talk about it.
right. Has that passed yet? I know.
It's signed.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that today or a week ago?
Last Friday.
Okay. I'm gonna hold off just because, like, you know, yeah. I think relative to I'd be really surprised anywhere that, like, let's say I lost the 17th pick in the 2020 draft for $2.75 million. I think that I don't see a $2.75 million NIL deal for any college baseball player. I do think there's a player on my team that loves being here, that loves playing here, that is so committed to our program that if you told him that he had an NIL deal for what his signing bonus would be, he would return to LSU. So I do think there's but you know, we're not facilitating that. So you know, that's I think it's to be determined as far as where we are in the NIL space and world. I feel very confident and very comfortable with what our school and athletic department have done. I think we're really progressive, and we have a fan base and a community that cares more about their college baseball team than any place in the world. So I think we're as well positioned as anybody to maximize that.
How
With
closely have
the-
you followed the scholarship bump?
I'm sorry?
How closely have you followed the scholarship bump? You're supposed to bump college baseball.
I've heard it for years, so until somebody tells me it's happening, I don't believe it, unfortunately.
Talked a lot about like the disadvantages of a late draft and everything, but with all these changes to Major League Baseball, are there any advantages for college baseball that you're sensing like that might convince more kids to come?
Yeah, I mean, they're cutting minor league teams, which means they're cutting jobs. And so it's an industry, from a global standpoint, it's growing. From maybe a United States standpoint, it's shrinking. And so there's a lot more volatility, a lot more risk in the decision of signing out of high school because there's less teams, there's less opportunity. Therefore, it probably pushes more people or young players into college baseball. And really, for me, I just, from the big perspective, I just want players to be where they're supposed to be. And I just think there's so much emotion involved with it, and then you get money involved in it. And I'm never going to make a judgment on what a player or a family does or chooses. But the fact is, if you're not the first pick of an organization, you are expendable. And then like this is, I'm pointing out to the field here, this is so awesome. Like, you're giving up a lot by walking away from this. You're giving up a lot from walking away from college in general and a natural progression or transition into manhood in our case. And I believe in it so much. It's just, the emotional pull on young 18-year-olds whose brains aren't fully developed, and it just, they get them. They get them a lot of times. So we just try to educate them, work really hard on that. Our whole staff has put together, like, this is why you do this. And then if somebody wants to buy you out of that, they really gotta buy you out of it. I mean, I had a pitcher on my team last year, pitched in the big leagues less than 12 months after he pitched in Omaha. And there's guys that we lost in the same recruiting class in the draft that hadn't made the major leagues to that point. So it's not, you can get there faster through here. I mean, you'll see guys like Jacob and Cade. Those are good players. Like, they're going to go and they're going to perform well because they're incredibly prepared, and they'll be in the big leagues pretty quickly. So for me, it's like, this is so awesome. Like, why would you not want to do this? And the development platform is better. The transition into becoming a man is better. Education, college degree is pretty important. So getting, at least 3/4 of the way done with that, for me, it would just have to be like stupid, astronomical, like you could fall flat on your face and never have to work another day in your life money to not do this. But, everybody thinks I got a logo on my chest and I have a biased opinion, but I could argue that point all day long and make a lot of really good points.
I dug up my notes from that first interview, and you said that you really wanted to work on the strength and conditioning when you got here and ratchet up the summer ball program for position players.
Yeah.
That's what you said. Strives towards that, and where do you feel now?
Yeah, I think almost all of them are out. The position players are out playing, with a couple exceptions. I mean, the guys that we're anticipating going to pro baseball are not playing right now, position players, that is. The pitchers, there's a couple that are throwing. Most of them are not, and that's just a belief system that I have of how you structure the year and when they need to be up and down and hot. There's a couple guys we want working on a couple things. So that's kind of how that's fine. As far as the strength and conditioning thing, I'm always evaluating that. When I looked around the SEC, and this is no slide on our players, and you're at the SEC tournament, and there's a few teams that are more physical looking than our team. And part of that's recruiting, and part of that is strength and conditioning, and part of it's nutrition. And so look at all those areas and go, how do we go from where we are to elite? And, it's one layer, and it's a really important layer that we make sure we get right. And I feel good about the things we're doing to make it right.
You talked about feeding them a lot this year. Do you feel like that made the strides that you wanted?
Yeah, ask them. They're the one. Their opinions are the only ones that matter on that. But somebody I admire a lot, said spend your money in baseball on finding them and feeding them, and something I've tried to live by.
Is there a guy who sort of came to the forefront toward the end of this year that you're kind of excited to see what they turn up like this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think got to get Ty Floyd through the draft, but I think it'll be a good decision for him to return, and I think he made some great strides, and I think
could really create value for himself next year here and be huge to the success of our team. He kind of comes to mind on the pitching side of it. I was proud of the last few outings that he had, and I think he can get better from that. And I think we have a good plan of how to get him better. I mean, of the freshmen, I mean, Josh Pearson was clearly the guy that contributed the most. I mean, he's been a name for a couple years, but like Trey Morgan, I think really improved at the end of the season. And I think in a way that I think he understands what he needs to do to be the type of player that he wants to be, and then ultimately contribute to our success next year. That might fly under the radar because everybody just points at him as he's a great player, and he is a great player. But I think we found some things that I'm really confident in what his season is going to look like next year. I mean, even a guy like Dylan, again, he's the co-SEC Player of the Year, so you could lose track of that. I think he really improved, towards the end of the season. And, that's stuff that I look at and monitor and feel good about. I mean, we talked about Jordan, did a nice job defensively, had several big hits. So I think there's a really good foundation there. I think the things that we need to improve are really clear, and I think, structurally, personnel, talent-wise, we're moving in a good direction on all that.
What would you like to see out of the catcher position?
I'd like to see Alex get healthy. I'd like to see Hayden get healthy. I'd like to have a full fall to work with both of them, both defensively and offensively. I'd really like Brady Neal and Jared Jones to come to college. And I think at that point you'd feel really good about it, where, 3 of the 4 they're going to find at-bats for themselves. And Alex just changes your pitching staff and, in terms of the things he can do behind the plate. So I feel good about it. I think I've had great meetings with the other guys' families, and I had good meetings with those guys at the end of the year, and, we'll see. But the pitchers that will be coming here and the pitchers that are returning should feel really good about how we'll defend at the catcher position.
Can you elaborate about that? Because I think a lot of people just feel like Tyler did a great job.
He did a great job.
He had missed, whatever. But I think they kind of undervalue or underestimate the importance of what the catcher does for the pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this about a few guys, and I feel like along the way, you picture that team this year without Tyler McManus. Good luck. I mean, good luck. Seriously. Really proud of him. I hope he gets a pro baseball opportunity, and I think somebody would be really happy about that. I think he'll be an amazing coach someday, pro coach, college coach, high school coach, if that's what he wants to do. But I think somebody should give him a pro opportunity. The catcher touches the ball. The pitching starts and ends on the mound. So the guy that affects the pitcher the most is the catcher, and is going to touch the ball almost every pitch. It's one of those positions where defense is way more important than offense. And I don't know how the season would have played out had both Hayden and Alex stayed healthy in terms of where the reps would have been. But I think both of them have some strengths as defensive catchers, and that will help us. I think Brady is the best defensive catcher in the class, relative to the high school guys. We went and saw Jared a while ago, and he can, with big time power, and we're impressed with how much more advanced he looks as a catcher. Ethan Frey is a catcher / first baseman. So I'm excited about all those guys, and it'll kind of sort itself out, and I think we'll be in a good spot, but it's super important.
What goes into finding those summer ball destinations for some of these players? I know you've talked a lot about the Cape Cod League, but there's so many options.
There is. What does the player need in terms of at-bats, improvement, and then just having a track record of 20 years of doing this, of who has good host families, who takes care of them from a food standpoint, what's the coaching staff situation look like, what is their role on the team going to be, is it aligned with what the player needs to do to improve to be a great player for LSU. So we actually don't have them spread out a ton. Usually, this year was a little different in terms of change in schools, but the lacrosse loggers in the Northwoods League, Josh Stevenson and Luke Lato are playing there, and Chris Goodell, the GM, runs a first-class organization. It's they'll always have 3 or 4 LSU players forever, because over the last 20 years, or 16 years, they've really taken care of our players. Scott Pickler in the Cape, Yarmouth Dennis, where Jordan is playing and where Trey was going to go had he not made Team USA. I mean, he works those guys hard, and the position players, and they improve in playing for him. And so I just kind of have my spots. And then as you get an older player that's maybe been through it 3 or 4 times, that player and I kind of talk about what's best, and do they need at bats? Do they need to, lift and kind of recharge for the last go around? It's just, what makes sense, and be deliberate to help them out.
Would you describe Jacob Berry's injury as flukish, like a flukish
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
And I'm sure, certainly, how did that just, I don't want to say change everything, but certainly if he's batting the same way he's batting all year down the stretch and everything, you get a sense of his pain when he was playing that regional? Or
I think he's a really tough kid. We're at Alabama. He did it before the Friday game, and then went out and got 2 hits. I know he had the hit that tied the game when we were behind. Didn't really say anything about it, and then the next morning when he's like, "Hey, can I come talk to you?" And I was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Well, this probably is not good because he's tough. I don't think he's ever come to me and said something about he had a heart thing at Arizona as a freshman, and then he was back like 10 days later. So that just kind of gives you the example of how tough he is. And he couldn't play that next day against Alabama. We won the Sunday game, one of my favorite wins of the year by the team. And then it is a factor, in that Ole Miss series. They came in and they beat us, but still, 2 of those games were right there for the taking, and he's worth 3 runs a game. So, that hurt, and then he gutted it out, was awesome against Vanderbilt. It's batting right-handed against right-handed pitching. Again, another testament to his toughness and character, but then got hit on the other hand, and that kind of screwed up the SEC tournament, and is what it is. Everybody has injuries. We had some at the wrong time, and it's like I said, it's like taking a Heisman Trophy, candidate out, But he had a great season, hit 400 in the SEC, bunch of big hits, and whoever takes him in those first 10 picks is going to be really, really happy with the player and the person.
Braden Joubert, what do you want out of him in the summer and fall?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen what he's going to do with the draft, and he had 18 home runs at LSU. I think if he did a track record of players that hit 18 home runs in their draft year at LSU, there's a chance they're moving on. I think he's got to decide, is he really ready for that, to go be successful or not? And, our conversations have been good, and credit to him at the end. That Vanderbilt series, we made a swing adjustment, and he's talented, and he figured it out, and he hit like 5 home runs in the next 3 games. And so it's all there, and, he just wants to be more consistent. I want him to be more consistent, and so we'll see. It's kind of a wait-and-see, ongoing conversation.
This may be another too early to tell kind of question, but do you feel that your team next year will be more consistent and not as much plug and see?
I'd like to. I think, I look at some of the teams that are playing today. It's like Notre Dame has like 7 fifth-year guys in the lineup, and it really hasn't changed over the last 2 years of who's played. Texas, I played those guys in 2020, and it's like the same lineup. Like we played in March of 2020 is still playing, and you kind of just had a sense that they were going to be there. And I think if you can kind of condense it where you have an older team and kind of where everybody fits, that's when you have your best chance. We certainly have a lot of guys returning. They got a lot of valuable experience this year. I think, you mark out Jacob and Cade and Tyler, obviously, because he was a senior. Those guys are going to be gone. And it's tough to replace their contribution, but that's how it's going to go here. We're always going to be moving guys on to pro baseball. So I think it remains to be seen, but it'll be open competition and in the fall, and want it to be highly competitive, and to play successfully here, you have to be able to deal with that. And but I like the start of it, and I like where we're going and trying to improve it as we're going right now.
Same thing on the mound too.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm really proud of those guys. We ran out. We didn't finish great from the Ole Miss series. We did pitch well at Vanderbilt. SEC tournament wasn't great. Regional was not good. but those guys gave us everything they had within their talent. It's Mikhail. I hope somebody gives him a chance. Really had a great career here. And it's like I mentioned with Tyler earlier, if he's not on the 22 team, it's hard to kind of imagine that. But I do think, we have a good plan for this year. We kind of had to see what everybody had. Okay, how are we going to win game one of the season, with what we have? Now you can take a guy that needs to improve a certain part of their pitch repertoire, force him to do it in all these inter-squad games, so he may get hit or may struggle here, but we kind of know what we have a little better, but by doing all that, it gives him a chance to be better when the season starts. And so I'm going to make sure on the pitching side that that's kind of how we roll. We weren't afforded that opportunity this year, but we need to do it for those guys, and I will make sure that that's what happens. And we've talked, Blake Money, Sam Dutton, Grant Taylor. That was the conversation of, okay, you're here. How do you get here? Here's where we see the gap. So everything you do is going to be geared towards closing that gap. Good? All right.
Portal, just call him.
All right. I know you guys missed me for 2 weeks.
Yeah. I got to fill this time. 2 weeks. It's such an asset now. Like I remember at Rotary, you were like, it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. It's here kind of thing. And now it's kind of free agency. Like, do you see that now as even more of a benefit than we've ever possibly thought, because you can get proven guys at a level. And how much, kind of like fact and fiction you said earlier, are guys at mid-majors looking at schools like you to be like, hey, I'm gonna go finish this thing in style.
It's different for every player, and you have a need on a team. It's great. You can fit it, fill it. Okay, picture that this year without Jacob Berry, Riley Cooper, Tyler McManus, Bryce Collins, Eric Raiselman. It's hard to picture. It's really hard to picture. And there's teams that aren't Sonny DeShera, co-player of the year, transfer guy. I think it's important to just be balanced in what you're doing and looking at the whole thing. And sometimes things change for players. Sometimes things change for programs and figuring out what you need and how to put it together. So it's there. So we want to use it as a positive for LSU. And I think just being thoughtful in how you use it is really important.
Is Jamie just on it all day?
All of them are.
Yeah.
If I don't hear from them, within every hour and a half of.
That's how it's got to be, though.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, at a place like this where we have the personnel and the resources to do that, we need to be on top of
You
it.
feel like you're running through a Costco with that transfer portal?
I don't know, man. Whatever we're doing is half of what Coach McMahon just had to do in basketball. So I probably need to go spend some time with him because that was awesome.
You really called it with Ole Miss when they came here. They were 10-14 in the SEC. You said this is the best team we've played to this point, and that's come to fruition, right?
Yeah, played those guys last year. I remember looking at the bracket when it came out in 2021 and going like, all right, we're going to have to do it. Like, that's a real team. And they're all back. They were all back. And they were playing well early. And, just talking about injuries, like that matters when you're talking. Like Kevin Graham's one of the best players in the SEC. He didn't play for like 4 weeks or something like that. It affected us when Jacob Berry didn't play for some time. So, yeah, I think that they could win it all. They could definitely win it all. And, those guys stayed around for a fourth year. They had the number one recruiting class in 2018. This is 4 years from now. And outside of the two pitchers that they had last year, they're all there still. And it's what it takes now to get to Omaha. It's not a given. You need to do things right, and things need to go your way sometimes. And they did, and credit to them for persevering. And, when I saw the bracket come out, it was like, if we're in a super regional, that's who we're playing. Like, we're going to be playing at home because that's who we're going to be playing. So, not surprised.
What about our boy Beloso? I'm done. This isn't for air. Is it a decision?